be your host here today. And I'm really happy to welcome Dan Lin. Dan Lin is a longtime executive from the travel business. He's been in hospitality. He's been in OTAs. He's been in shared accommodation. Maybe you could say he's in tech now as well. So Dan, let me kick it over to you while we're waiting for everyone to kind of fill in for a quick introduction for Dan Lin as well as Zuzu. What's up, Dan?
Hey everybody, hey Brett, thank you for having me on. It's nice to be able to connect with everybody whilst we're all stuck at home. So I hope everyone's doing okay, not going crazy. For those of you who are still going into your hotels, I hope everything's safe and clean and happy where you all are. As Brett says, I've been working in different bits of travel and mainly hotels for 10, 15 years. And Vikram and myself, we set up Zuzu 4 years ago to really help empower independent hotels. And we're thrilled that we get to a chance to sort of help out with our sort of thoughts and ideas at this difficult time. So thank you to Brett for setting this up and inviting us to join.
So tell us about Zuzu's. How old is Zuzu and what's happening at Zuzu now? What are you focused on?
Yeah, so we're about 4 years old, and our sort of reason for being is to empower independent hotels. And what our perspective is that independent hotels offer exactly what travelers want. They want a unique experience, a local experience, a differentiated experience. But what independent hotels really need help if they're going to thrive is they need help with revenue management and distribution. And so we've built a set of technology, and then we have a bunch of revenue managers in our organization that deliver that revenue management and distribution to hotels across Southeast Asia. There are more than 2,000 hotels across the region that we do this work for, and we help them really optimize their online presence. We help them really get the most out of these online travel channels and grow their online revenues by 30, 40, 50% on average. And so we're there through the good times, we're there through the bad times. We're just this partner who sort of sits behind the hotels. You'll never see our name in a hotel. We're not a travel-facing brand or a partner to these independent hotels, really helping them thrive and fundamentally helping a hotelier focus on delivering a delightful experience in the hotel, because they know that we're taking care of the stuff behind the scenes about pricing and distribution.
Awesome. So thanks for the quick intro, Dan. I think if you haven't heard of Zuzu, I would definitely consider them one of the hottest travel startups, hospitality startups on the planet, not just in Southeast Asia. And Dan and Vikram, the founders, are two guys I admire most in the space. Really out focused on both tech as well as service delivery. And I really like on your website the way you guys focus on kind of this idea around it's service first, backed by tech. That's a really great approach. Let me give a quick intro. Two great webinars coming up. Don't miss these if you haven't signed up. One is focused on probably GMs and HR leaders. Other focused squarely on hospitality GMs. Don't miss those coming up over the next 7 days or so. Over the last few webinars, we've talked about the recovery model, and I'm just including these slides so you can have them in download if you missed some of the earlier webinars. But we really think it's going to be a Y-shaped recovery, which means we decline very fast. We're going to come back at two different paces. One is a really fast Y. People like Zoom, people like Netflix are already performing great even in this COVID economy. And other sectors will come back, quite slowly. Unfortunately, ours is one of those, which is travel. Listening to a lot of other webinars and talking to a lot of other professionals, people like Douglas Quinby at Arrival, Booking.com, Sabre. MG has put together our view of what recovery looks like in Southeast Asia. And we've reviewed this over the last few calls. One of the hottest areas of interest is, of course, the restricted phase, because that's when travel starts to come back, right? Everyone's waiting for travel to come back and wondering what should they do during that period, right? And in that recovery period, everyone knows OTAs are going to be a really critical component. So that's why we invited Dan here today to talk about that restricted phase, to think about how should we not leverage OTAs during the recovery phase. So with that, Dan, I will hand it over to you.
Okay, great. So, um, what I'm going to talk about is, a little bit of sort of our thinking about how you should use OTAs, and some of this builds upon stuff that's always true. How to use OTAs, what OTAs are good at, what OTAs are not so good at, and some of it it's very specific to this time. Um, and so, if we think about where we are now, we're very much in the lockdown phase at the moment. But the expectation is, as we come out of this lockdown phase, we're going to move into what Brett is terming this sort of restricted recovery phase. And so that's the phase I'm thinking about first. That's the phase that is going to start presenting opportunities to us over the next, in some cases over the next few weeks, as Vietnam is probably moving into this phase right now with the gradual easing of restrictions there. For some of the countries in the region, this phase is going to come maybe in a month from now or even in 2 months from now. It's going to be different at different stages. And so, we put together some thoughts about how you should think about moving into that phase and what you need to be doing. And so, where we really start from is that, why is it important to be thinking about OTAs as we move into this restricted recovery phase? And quite simply, it's because OTAs are going to be about speed. Digital is about speed. Online travel agencies will be where we see any sort of recovery happening first. Unfortunately, offline travel agencies have a whole bunch of other hurdles that they're going to have to go through to get their businesses ready to start driving volumes again.
Looks like we lost Dan. We'll hope that he gets back in. He was just talking about the first place that you'll see some recovery is with OTAs, and that's the topic of his presentation, so I'm not going to disagree with him. But I think there's actually two places where you're going to see the recovery happen. One is definitely OTAs will be out there hungry and fast at trying to power the leisure travel comeback. But I think corporate travel is also going to be one of the places where you see an immediate return. Obviously, OTAs that have a corporate offering or traditional travel agents that are ready to go at the time that the market starts to slowly relax are going to be the beneficiaries. So in addition to OTAs, I think corporate also has a great opportunity right at the beginning of the opening. Hey, I see Dan back. Dan, I was just dancing while you're out. We caught you. We lost you at the OTAs are going to be great partners as this restricted phase starts to provide some opportunities. Back to you.
Yeah, I could hear you. I don't know why my thing disappeared. Yeah, so I think OTAs have the opportunity to get back online the fastest. Offline travel agencies are going to take a little longer to come back. So OTAs will get back online quicker. So where we see any sort of recovery, I think it's going to be in the OTA space first. They don't have to worry about getting their offices clean. They don't have to worry about getting their staff back together, about local transport restrictions coming back. Their websites are up. They're ready to go. The moment there's any sort of recovery, you'll see it here first. So this is the place where you've got to be on more than ever. I think, it's certainly true that OTAs are always important, but I think more than ever, OTAs will be the place where this comes back first. And so, we've always said, look, OTAs have a particular role to play when it comes to distribution. We would all love if every single traveler would just come to our own direct website and book directly with us online. But we know in Asia Pacific that about 80% of online travel happens in OTAs, about 20% happens on your direct website. And so you've got to think about those two things as two very different things. Your direct website is a phenomenal tool if somebody knows your hotel, if they know their name and they're actively looking for you. Your direct website is a phenomenal tool for your repeat customer, for people who've already stayed at your hotel before, who then want to stay a second time, a third time. If they're still booking through OTAs, then you're not doing it right. So your direct website is fantastic when it comes to retention. But when it comes to new customers and far-flung customers, and for people that you've never stayed in your hotel before, as an acquisition channel, OTAs are unbeatable. So OTAs are really the place to get new people, because trying to acquire those customers yourself, trying to spend money bidding on Google, trying to spend money on marketing for those customers is incredibly expensive. And I won't repeat all of our sort of analysis on that. I've talked, I think, to probably many of you before about sort of competing on destination terms, competing on generic terms is so incredibly expensive. That it's really not a great strategy. Let the OTAs do that. And yes, you have to pay 15, 20% for those bookings, but that's much lower than you would have to pay if you were trying to get those directly yourself. So the OTAs have a role. So then we started thinking about, okay, well, given where we are now in the world, given this crazy world that we're in right now, what do you need to be thinking about as a hotel? So we've got 8 things that we really think are important. And number one is really just, starting off with putting our hands up and saying, look, we don't know what the world's going to look like. We all have perspectives about how the recovery is going to happen, about which bits are going to recover first, about which OTAs are going to recover first. But none of us definitively know, because none of us have gone through a situation exactly like this. So, it's almost, I like this quote from this author, Commander Kajuri: what you choose also chooses you. Where you choose to be, where you choose to put your hotel, where you choose to advertise your hotel, which channels you choose to be on, are the channels that are going to deliver for you. And right now, you've got to be making lots and lots and lots of bets. You can't be relying on, domestic travel is going to recover first, so it's going to be all about Traveloka, or in Indonesia, or Agoda in Thailand. You can't be relying on, we've seen this channel deliver for in the past, so that's the channel that's going to recover first. You've got to be making lots of bets. You've got to be incredibly flexible, and you've got to be incredibly responsive to wherever you see demand starting to pick up, and then doubling down on that. So you've got to be broad in your distribution approach. You've got to be making lots and lots of little bets at this time. And that's probably like a statement that seems obvious, and it's sort of like one of those things that you should be doing all the time anyway, but it is particularly important right now because nobody definitively knows how this recovery is going to happen.
Just on that, I've seen a lot of GMs and revenue managers talking groups about, hey, we want to petition or demand or ask that OTAs kind of reduce their commission levels down to 0 or 10% or 5% during the kind of recovery to help out hotels. To me, that just sounds like funny. Like, I can't imagine. They're also like hungry for cash. Do you anticipate there's going to be any kind of kindness or generosity during that phase from OTAs?
I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, I understand the sentiment. You've seen OTAs do that selectively when there's been a particular destination that's been impacted. They've put in place flexible policies. After Fukushima, I know a bunch of OTAs put in a very specific policy to help Fukushima recover after a volcano. So I think there are cases where the OTAs will do that. I just think this is such a global situation that the OTAs are just fundamentally not going to be able to afford to do it. They've got their own cost structures. They've got their own concerns about their viability. I can't see them doing that. Now, I think what you should be on the watch out for, and I don't imagine most of the OTAs will do this, is anybody trying to exploit the situation by putting up prices. But it wouldn't surprise me if 1 or 2 OTAs do something, bad in a particular region, or bad in maybe some of the smaller OTAs. And if you see any of that stuff, you should be pushing back very strongly against that. So anybody who tries to put up your commissions right now, if it's a small OTA, or I'll talk in a bit about, anybody who sort of say, oh, if you go exclusive with me, I'll give you that. Any of that sort of bad behavior, you should be particularly strong on. And that's where lobbying and getting an industry voice together would be very important. But I can't see OTAs broadly saying, okay, we'll get rid of all commissions, because it's just too big an impact for them.
Right on. All right, keep going.
Okay. So if you think about, okay, you've got to make lots of bets. So everybody will be talking about we all expect the domestic market to come back first. I think, I've seen, talking about those sort of, is this going to be a V shape or a U shape or a Y shape? One of the things I've seen is this sort of a wonky W shaped recovery where you see the domestic market come back and that lifts us to a certain level. We've seen that in China, and then we flatline for a while. Maybe we go down as things have to tighten again, and then we finally pick up when international comes back. And certainly, if you look at Singapore, before Singapore went into lockdown, its international inbound business was way down, but its domestic business was through the roof because people were now thinking about, okay, doing staycations. So we all expect domestic to come back first. It's a very logical thing to be expecting. I think, though, the issue is if everybody's expecting that, if everybody's betting on that, one of the things you've got to be careful of is everybody's going to be chasing that same domestic traveler. Everyone's going to be like, okay, if you're in Indonesia, it's Traveloka and Peggy Peggy. If you're in Thailand, it's Agoda. So there's one concern I have, which is if everybody is just making the bet on the same thing, which is the domestic recovery, we're all going to be chasing the same traveler. So whilst you should be going after that, you should also think about, not giving up on these other opportunities. You still need to be making your bets on the global opportunity, the Bookings and Expedias. You still need to be making your bets on the Chinese opportunity from Trip.com and Fliggy. You still need to be making your bets on other regional opportunities. Like, if North Asia is going to get in control of this virus earlier, then maybe the Japanese traveler will be an attractive opportunity, even if it hasn't been particularly important for you in the past. You've got to be making a multiple sets of bets because you can't rely on just following the logic of the domestic travel is going to come back first, so let's just go for the domestic piece, because everyone's going to be chasing that same piece. And certain countries are net importers, or certain destinations, Bali and Phuket are net importers of tourists. And if every hotel just relies on the domestic traveler in Bali and Phuket, there's not enough domestic travelers to get you back to where you were. So whilst it's very sensible, very logical to go after your domestic traveler, you do need to be still making bets to, how would you try and get some of that global traveler? How would you try and get some of that Chinese traveler? How would you try and get some of that regional traveler? So you can't just bet on the one thing. You've got to make a multiple set of bets, I think, to really get a good chance for you here. So that's the first sort of thing I would think about, make lots of bets. The second piece is that now really starting to think about, okay, well, how does an OTA work? And this is something I love talking about because this is something I built many years ago at Expedia, which is the sort order. When you look at any destination and you sort of type a destination name, this is Penang in Malaysia, you type a destination in the sort order, the order that they choose to show those hotels. Is driven by an algorithm on these sites. And 90% of demand comes from the first page. When there's thousands and thousands of options, it's about being in this first page. And they're constantly changing the way that this sort order is done.
Right.
Different people see different things. But fundamentally, there's an algorithm that sits underneath this, which is what's the value to the OTA if they sell your hotel, multiplied by what's the predicted likelihood of selling. And that's the fundamental way that they work out this algorithm. And the most important part in it is this low price, or your price relative to your perceived quality and your competitors. And your perceived quality can be defined by your star rating and your review scores. And then they're comparing how you weigh up versus that, versus how your competitors weigh up versus that. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important part of how this sort algorithm works on an OTA. So lots of people will quite rightly say, right now in this kind of lockdown phase, there's no good reason to just like slash your price because you can't make the volume back up. And that is absolutely correct. But when we start to move into the recovery phase, without slashing prices, you've got to be really intelligent, I think, about flexing your prices. Because if the most important part of the sort order algorithm is how your price relative to your competitors, you've got to be really thinking about moving your price around. And so this is a set of analysis for one of our hotels in Singapore, comparing their performance with everybody else. And you can look for the next certain set of days and see everybody's moving their prices around a lot. They're trying to find demand. Um, for too many hotels, pricing looks like this. Pricing for far, far too many hotels is super flat. If you look at the dark green line here, you've got one hotel here. It's got a weekday and a weekend price. You've got another hotel in the super light green. It's trying to do some revenue management for the next few days, and then after that, just a flat price. You've got another hotel who's looking at prices for the next few days and then staggering things down, but again, it's just flat into the future. If you're not constantly iterating, moving these around and finding where that optimal point is, you are going to not get the demand you need. And this is not about slashing prices. I entirely agree. You cannot make this back up in volume, even when we get into the recovery phase. But if your price here and your competitor is priced just above you, you're going to be in trouble. You've got to be hyper aware of how your competitors are pricing. And far too many hotels are not. And far too many hotels will lose 10, 20, 30% of the potential demand that's out there because the competitor is priced a couple of dollars below them. And that competitor will be just scooping up the demand. And yes,
and what's the frequency that's appropriate? Like, do I need to be looking at that 1,000 times a day using an algorithm? Or is my revenue manager looking at my comp set once a day, once a week? What's the frequency that would constitute, you think, is like good hygiene during the recovery?
Yeah, so look, it depends on the market that you're operating in. It really depends on how good your competitor hotels are at revenue management. The more they're doing, the more you've got to do. So if you're in a market where you see your competitors never moving their prices, then you don't have to do this more than once a day. If you're in a market where you're seeing your competitors move their prices 2 or 3 times a day, then you need to move your prices 4 or 5 times a day. You just need to be one step ahead of your competition. I find these types of analysis that we do, where we look at, okay, what's the evolution of a price? So this is how is a price changed for a particular stay date as you get closer and closer in. And what we always see is you see competitor hotels very, very focused on moving around their prices for the next 7 days. But if you go beyond 7 days out, looking to this sort of these earlier time periods, you see very flat curves. So what that means is if you change your prices for days 7 and out, for your advanced purchase window beyond 7 days, if you change them once a week, you're probably doing more than your competitors. If you change your prices for days, advanced purchase windows 2 days to 7 days once a day, you're probably doing more than your competitors. And if you change your prices for check-ins today and tomorrow 4 or 5 times a day, you're probably doing more than your competitors. And that's the key piece. Do more than your competitors. If you want to get an unfair advantage as a hotel, just be one step ahead of your competitors. And then, what they're doing you're just reacting to it, you're responding. Doesn't always mean you go below them. Your hotel may be deserving of a premium, but you've got to be one step ahead of your competitor because there's going to be a limited amount of demand out there when we go into this recovery phase. And if your competitor is just taking a disproportionate portion of that by just being a couple of dollars lower than their quality says that your quality is worth, then they'll be taking a lot of the demand that you can't get hold of. So you've got to be much, much more proactive in both flexing your prices and be more aware than you have been about how your competitors' pricing is to stay one step ahead of them. The good news is that there's thousands and thousands of hotels in this region. I mean, we think there's like 65,000 independent hotels in Southeast Asia. So, if the 500 of you here get really good at this, it's not like there's still 60,000 other hotels who are going to be one step behind. So just be more on top of this than you ever have been. Be more focused on this than you have been in the past, and that's one way of getting out of this a little bit earlier. And we do this, but there are also a bunch of tools you can buy that can help you. So we're not the only people who can help you with this. OTA Insight is a great tool that can help you with this. The OTAs, on Expedia, they have some stuff that can help you with some of this. So wherever you get this data from, it doesn't really matter. But get on top of this data and be one step ahead of your competition. Okay, so that's 3. 4. The way that these search algorithms work on the OTAs, they're taking all this data And it's all this shopping data. It's all about how do customers respond when they show them this hotel, this hotel. How do customers respond when they show them this hotel at this price, this hotel at this price? Right now, all of the OTAs are seeing their volumes down by 90%. Their search volumes, people shopping on these sites. What that means is that these search algorithms are going to be hypersensitive, much more sensitive than they normally are, much more sensitive than when they were designed to small changes, because there's now low volume. So that means any of these sort algorithms are going to be a lot more volatile in the way that they react. If you change your prices and see a little bit of booking pickup, you'll see a lot more response in the way that these algorithms work, because they're all running off a lot less data than they have in the past. So be prepared that any change you make in terms of impact in the OTA world may have more impact than you would usually see. So a small price change may have a bigger change in terms of your sort order, both up and down.
Good, yeah. Good and bad, right?
Good and bad, yeah. A negative review may push you a lot further down than it used to. A positive review may push you a lot further up than it used to. So just be prepared that these sort order algorithms are going to get a lot more volatile because there's a lot less data going into them. So any data point that you get right now is going to count for a lot more. Now, at the same time, there's a lot less search volume out there. So in a way, you're not necessarily going to see a lot more bookings or a lot less bookings. But as the recovery starts, just be aware and just be watching. If you normally are on page 3 or 4 or 5 in a sort order, and you change your price by $10 and see you move up a page, maybe now when you change your price by $10, you're going to move up 3 pages. So if you're watching this stuff and trying to see the reaction, just be prepared that there's going to be more changes, because all these OTAs are working with a lot less data. So just be a lot more vigilant about the impact that these changes are having in your hotel visibility on these sites, and watch the visibility metrics and any metrics they show you about your average sort position. Just watch those and just check that things are doing what you expect them to do. Okay, that's 4. 5, price parity. So look, price parity is something that we actually really believe is always important. There is sometimes a desire to play around with prices on different channels by hoteliers. There's also, I know, sometimes naughty games by some of the OTAs, like the one that's the cheapest here, to sort of flex prices even if you say that they can't. So we as an industry have to stay on top, I think, of price parity, because it's in our interest, certainly for your third-party distribution, to have price parity. The reason being that anything you do to try and flex your prices across different channels, to shift demand to lower cost distribution channels, it ends up being punished by the OTAs, because one of the factors in their sort order is parity. All of the OTAs want to present to their customers, to the travelers, this idea that they have at least the equal best prices. They don't necessarily have lower prices than everyone else, but they certainly don't want to have more expensive prices than everyone else. So if ever they find that your hotel is giving prices to another channel that are cheaper than them, they would say, okay, well, you're now making us look bad to our customers, so we're going to push you right down the sort order. So parity is particularly important, and parity will be more important than ever, mainly because all of the other factors that are tied to conversions and bookings are going to have a lot less data in them right now. So all of the things that are tied to kind of current performance, bookings and conversion and all that stuff, there's going to be a lot less data in them. So things that are more sort of static, like parity, are you giving me the same rates and the same availability that you're giving to other channels, are going to become more important than ever. So it's really important that you have API integrations with all of the OTAs so that they all have the same availability, so they all get the same prices. And then if you do see any of these OTAs doing any funny things, selling your package rates in the standalone channel, or bringing in an offline rate that's not meant to be online, or doing any sort of funny business with FX, whatever they're doing to break parity, if they're doing it, you've then got to be contacting the OTAs and be pushing back on, hey, that's not the rate, shouldn't be selling that rate. And most of the OTAs will stop that stuff when you call them on it. Even the naughty one here, they will, if you call them on it, they will stop doing it. But you've got to be on top of watching this, and you've got to be reaching out to them, because you will get punished on the other OTAs, and you need demand from as many channels as possible right now, even if it's low volumes, a little bit from Traveloka, a little bit from Agoda, a little bit from Booking, a little bit from Expedia, would get you back to the 30, 40, 50% of where we were as an industry, which is the sort of amounts that we could probably survive on rather than thriving, but you need it from everybody. And so you've got to make sure that you've got parity because you need a little bit of demand from everybody right now. To that end, if any of the OTAs start doing this game, say no and watch it really hard. Don't sign any contract without reading through all of the stuff. Avoid exclusivity like the plague. Even in good times, exclusivity is a bad idea. But in a tough time like this, we just don't know which channels are going to recover. We don't know which of the OTAs are feeling flush with marketing dollars and are going to go and spend a lot, and which of the OTAs are starting to run out of VC money and are going to stop spending so much. So don't sign an exclusivity agreement with anybody. No OTA can guarantee you demand at this point. If any OTA comes and says, hey, if you give me exclusivity, I'll put you on the top of the sort. Just being on the top of a sort on an OTA that's getting no demand right now is not going to save your business. So say no to anything that smells like exclusivity. Or looks like exclusivity, because it's just risking too much at this time. You need to be working.
What if it was just like short term, like Traveloka's offering me this great placement, but it's only for 1 week to help kickstart. Could I use it like short term?
I mean, just like the problem with anything like that is the moment you start favoring one OTA, all these OTAs, they watch them all like a hawk. So you give Traveloka exclusivity for a week to get something, and maybe you get some boost out of it. But the problem is then Booking will have scraped Traveloka and seen it. Expedia will have scraped, Agoda will have scraped, and then do you always give me the same stuff score on all of them? Will all go negative, and you'll be plunged down the sort order. So not only will you see a negative impact, you'll see a positive impact from the one channel for a week, but you'll see a negative impact from all the other channels for the week. And then after the week, this will go away, but this won't come right back because these things linger. These negatives in their sort algorithms linger. It'll take you a long, long time to get your quality score back up on all the channels. So whether it's Agoda or Booking or Expedia or Traveler, just try and avoid that stuff. Anything that looks like it's...
How about in some of the regional markets, like you talked about, for example, North Asia maybe coming back. Korea, Sunday started to open up the market, churches open, stores open. Could I do an exclusive deal with a regional OTA, maybe in Korea?
Look, I mean, the honest answer is that the big OTAs watch each other a lot, and they watch, I'd say, obviously the global OTAs like the Expedias, the Booking.coms, the Trip.com, Agodas, they all watch each other a lot. They also all watch Traveloka a lot because Traveloka's obviously got to a certain scale. There are some smaller OTAs in Korea that they watch less. There are some smaller OTAs in China that they watch less. So if one of them feels like they have something, then maybe you want to experiment with that a little bit. I'm not sure I would advise it because you never know what they're watching, and you never know. Look, it's probably not going to deliver you. A small OTA in Korea is probably not going to deliver you massive volume. It's probably not going to hurt you too much if you do it, but they're much more focused on making sure that they've got parity with the big global players and the other players that we consider a sort of an equal threat, which are the sort of if it's Traveloka, Expedia, Agoda, Booking.com, Trip.com, those five. Really be careful about doing anything exclusive with any of them because they all watch each other so much it'll end up hurting you in the long run. Doesn't mean you can't do. Look, if they've got programs where they'll say, "Hey, if you give me some extra commission, I'll give you some extra sort placement." That's different. That's an economic decision you can make. If you think it makes sense for your business, you can make that decision. That's not breaking exclusivity because that's not breaking the availability or the price to the consumer. And that's the thing they really care about because they don't want to give the impression that they don't have exclusivity, so that they don't have access to that stuff. If you want to do something behind the scenes, that's an individual decision for your hotel about does it make economic sense for you? You can try those things, but the breaking exclusivity in terms of rates or availability, I strongly not advise it.
All right, number 7.
Cool. So number seven. So obviously Expedia came out with a policy where they said right now we're only going to show refundable rates on our site. So anything you upload in terms of non-refundable rates into the extranet, they won't even show it. And their view is that there's just so much uncertainty right now about the world. It's so unclear what's going to happen that we're not going to create that potential liability. We're not going to create that workflow for our customer service team to have to argue about it. So they'll only show refundable rates right now. And I think we as an industry have to just recognize, that the reality of the consumer mindset right now, even when it comes to the domestic travel piece, is going to be so cautious and so maybe nervous about traveling that we probably have to lean into that. And I know that we would love to have some non-refundable rates out there to lock in a certain amount of income that would give us a certainty. But given what the OTAs are doing, and given the reality of the consumer mindset right now, we probably need to all be embracing refundable rates. And so we went through we'd had some hotels in our portfolio historically hadn't had any refundable rates, and all of a sudden we found them completely shut off from any demand. So we've had to go through and rebuild all our rate plans to make sure every single one of our hotels has these as an option. You shouldn't turn your non-refundable rates off. The moment Expedia changes its policy, you want those things to go back on. But you should have refundable rates for all of your rate plans that are out there right now. You're missing out on demand if you don't have it. You can price accordingly. There should be a differential between your refundable and your non-refundable, but you absolutely need to be embracing a refundable rate strategy going forwards. And I know that's tough, but it's just the reality of the world that we're in right now.
We had a question, or this point got talked about during the Anita Chan webinar a few days ago, and she was saying that refundable rates are the new normal. Like just no one's going to book anything that's not non-refundable. I don't know that I agree with that, and it could be I'm not going to book a month from now a non-refundable rate, but if things start to kind of ease up and I'm going to fly from Singapore to Bangkok tomorrow, I might be willing to pay a little bit less and take on a restrictive rate for a trip that's tomorrow, right? So I think it's not that they're going to be gone completely. Even in the early kind of easing phase, there's probably a place for both. During lockdown, I get Expedia's policy. Makes sense, but to your point, I think keeping non-refundable there is going to be important as well.
Yeah, Matthias in the message has just said that non-refundable rates are back on Expedia. I'm not sure whether that's for near-term stay dates or further out. My understanding was that they weren't on for near-term dates, but they were on for further out. Matthias said they're on now for near-term dates. That's a recent change. But yeah, you need to, no matter what the policy is, I think we all have to be out there with both. Because there's going to be demand for both to an extent, but you have to have the refundable rate for all your stay dates. I think you've got to have that there because there'll be enough consumers who are going to be nervous about this piece. Cool.
Great.
And then finally, we often get asked by our hotels, well, what should I be doing on my direct channel? So if that's what I'm going to be doing on my OTA channel, should I be offering a cheaper rate to people who come to my direct channel? And we always say a strong no. Okay, so the reason for this, two reasons for this. One, if you're offering a cheaper rate on your direct channel, you will get slammed by the OTAs in terms of breaking the parity piece, and then you're going to get pushed down the sort order. So you do want demand from them. The other thing is, if people have got to your direct channel, it's either because they've stayed with you before and they love your hotel and they want to stay in your hotel, or because they found you on the OTA and then they've come to your direct channel because they want to give you the booking without the OTA commission, or because they think that if they come to you direct, I don't know, you'll put them in the elevator, in the quiet, in the room that's quieter, not next to the elevator. So for whatever reason, if people have found their way to your direct website to book with you, you shouldn't then be giving them a lower rate because it breaks your parity, it hurts you with the OTAs, and also they're also showing you already that they're happy to book. So, we think the worst thing, and lots of hotels do this, is this kind of, if you come direct, we'll give you 10% off. We think that's a really bad revenue management strategy. If you want to give more, historically we've told people, well, this is the place to sort of push free cancellations really hard. Now, obviously, we've just said you need to be giving free cancellations probably to everybody right now. So, what are the other things that you could be doing in the OTA channel? Sorry, in your direct channel, you can be thinking about free upgrades. If there's a high quality room available, give that upgrade to people who book direct. Or the one we really like is if you have any other ancillary revenue streams in your hotel that only a subset of people are using, give them a discount for that. I used to be on the board of Movenpick hotels, and if you book direct, everybody got a $50 food and beverage credit because there was a big food and beverage revenue line in our hotels, but we knew that only about 40% of people ever used it. So, you give that $50 F&B credit, all of a sudden you would see 60, 70, 80% of people using the hotel restaurant. So yes, it's giving some dollars, but it's giving dollars that actually make you dollars by encouraging people to spend more in your hotel. So, historically, we've always argued with our hotels, give them a spa credit or give them an F&B credit. Now, spa credits, I don't know whether people are going to want spa credits right now with, for all social distancing. I don't know if I want to be rubbed down. But F&B credits are a great thing to give to your direct channel. So if you have a direct channel, don't give price discounts, but think about F&B credits or some other value add and upgrade that you can give in your hotel. Okay? So, sorry, I'm just reading one of the comments. You missed out on addressing package rates on OTAs and wholesalers. Thailand Hotels seeing forward bookings for later. Yeah, look, I think as part of your revenue management strategy, yes, your package rates are important. Packages are typically booked far in advance of standalone stuff. So package rates, if you've not been doing package rates with the OTAs, obviously some OTAs are really good at them, some are less good at them. I'd absolutely encourage you to have your package rates out there and be looking at those. Watch that the OTAs aren't disagreeing your package rates as standalone rates, but definitely be participating in package rates as well. So that is pretty much it. My eight to-dos. Number one, probably the most important one is make lots of bets, be on lots of channels, be very flexible. Nobody knows. We're giving some perspectives because we've been doing this for a while, but nobody is an expert on how to recover from a global pandemic, because unless you were running an OTA or an online travel business in 1918, we haven't done this for a while. So nobody knows exactly how this is going to work. So make lots of bets, be on lots of channels, be flexible, and respond to which are starting to show your demand. Be super flexible on your price. Be moving your price around a lot, finding your sweet spot. What you thought was your sweet spot, what you thought was the premium your hotel could charge over other hotels may not be anymore. Be hyper aware of how your hotels are competing on price. Be prepared for any changes you've made that normally would have had a small impact on your sort order in the OTAs to have an outsized impact because they're all operating with a lot less data. Be super vigilant about price parity because all of the data points that the OTAs have about your conversion are shrunk, but all of the data points they have about are you giving me parity versus price or availability are more important than ever because that's all the data they have right now. Avoid exclusivity like the plague that it is. So don't, you shouldn't be making a bet that one channel can deliver for you. You need to be working with them all. And right now, if you make a bet on one, the others are going to punish you for doing that. So avoid exclusivity. You've got to be trying to get a little bit from everybody right now. We are going to need to embrace refundable rates. And in your direct channel, think about value adds much more than price discount. There's this really tough trade-off that we have as an industry about not giving up our value, not slashing our prices. We can't ignore the fact that the consumer has less money in their pocket. What we've always seen when these big recessions is everybody moves down a star rating, or everyone moves down by 30 to 40% what they're prepared, or 20 to 30% by what they're prepared to pay. But there are smarter ways of responding to that. Value adds are a smarter way of responding to that than price discounts. So try and think about that as your way forward. So that's it from me. Feel free to reach out to me if you have anything else. I'm sure MG will share all this stuff, but feel free to reach out to me, Dan at ZuzuHS, if you want to sort of ask about any of these or talk about how we can help, or if you disagree with anything I said. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear that because there's so many good ideas out there in the industry right now.
Thanks so much, Dan. It's a great session. One of the things that we really push hard for in the MG Leadership Series is to have, thought leaders that come in and give real content, real actionable advice, not just come on and stumble through an hour of conversation about a topic. So Dan, I know I appreciate personally, and I know everyone who's attended this webinar appreciates kind of the clarity of your 8 items and your 8-item action plan. Thank you for sharing those insights. It's been a great session. We do have a Q&A that's opening up now. Please do not put questions in the chat channel. Go into the Q&A channel. If there's a question that you like, please upvote it. And we'll spend about 5 minutes on chat. One of the quick questions that I'll throw out to you, Dan, is people are asking a question about channel managers and how come the prices when they use a channel manager seem to be different, on OTA platforms?
Yeah, so look, they shouldn't be. So a couple of things happen with a channel manager infrastructure. Obviously, a channel manager is pushing out all of your rates to all of the OTAs, and theoretically, they should all be going at the same time. So they should have parity. A few things happen. One is that different OTAs have different lagginess in their systems. So most of the big global OTAs, when you push them a rate update, it gets shown pretty quick, but some of them have lag. Agoda used to have an older tech platform than, say, Booking. So you used to see this lag of like 5 or 10 minutes. But they've got a pretty, they seem to have revamped their stuff recently, so you see less of that now. But some of the smaller OTAs or kind of country-specific OTAs are still sometimes operating on old tech platforms and can get a bit overwhelmed. So that's one thing that happens. Second thing that happens is FX. So if you're a hotel in Indonesia and you're sending a rupiah price, and then the OTA is showing your price in Singapore dollars or US dollars or British pounds, then they can be using different FX to the other OTAs. And some of the OTAs are actually pretty smart about using this as a tactic. They'll deliberately show different FXs to make sure their price is $1 cheaper, so they win the meta search game. So sometimes they're messing about with FX, and that's one of the reasons. But that should be just $1 here or there, or 30, 40, 50,000 ringgit. I'm sorry, rupiah here or there. The third thing could be that the OTAs are doing something slightly more nefarious. So maybe they're showing your package rates as a standalone, or maybe they've gone to a less reputable bed bank than MG and have grabbed some offline rates and are showing them online. No, MG doesn't do this, but there are some out there that are still doing that. If you see stuff like that, if you see an OTA doing something you're like, there's no way that can be FX, that's when you email them. And honestly, we find that most OTAs, if you call them on something, then they will stop. So they'll blame it on some overambitious junior person trying something out, blah blah blah. We know that some of the OTAs have this as a matter of policy, but the moment you call them on it, they typically stop. So if this is something that we do for our hotels a lot. We're constantly just watching, and we'll just like, hey, that that's a package rate that shouldn't be on there, or you seem to have got that rate from some random little Eastern European bed bank. Stop showing that rate online. That's not meant to be online, and they will stop this stuff. And so if you see them on doing something like that, then you can call them on that. And the one exception that we see that we've never really been able to stop is where they're just monkeying about with being $1 less, $2 less, so that they win the meta search traffic. So maybe everyone's selling you for $100, but then one of them will be selling you for 99. They're normally doing something in their back-end system. They're probably taking that dollar out of their margin themselves just so they win the meta search traffic. It's a bit annoying, but most of the OTAs won't punish you for that because they recognize that they do that stuff themselves. So with a tolerance within $1 or tolerance within 10, 20, 30, 40,000 rupiah, they'll probably ignore in terms of parity.
Hey, Dan, I see Dan's one of the biggest thinkers in hotel distribution. For sure, you learned that today. One of the biggest thinkers in airline OTA distribution is Shen. I see Shen from Singapore join the webinar. He threw out a question around OTAs during this recovery phase. Will the OTAs become even more important as consumers trust the big OTA brands even more than they did before, and it makes it even a more difficult prospect for small independent brands to build direct volumes?
Well, look, I think two things will happen. So, we talked at the beginning about, I do think digital sales will recover faster than traditional offline sales just because of the digital's ready to go, right? Whereas offline's going to take a couple more hurdles that will have to be jumped over. Having said that, there's an argument that offline sales, trusting a person who can tell you whether what the visa restrictions. So for the international piece, there's an argument that maybe people will want to go back to the travel agent to understand what the visa restrictions are now. So there is a counter argument to that, but my suspicion is that at least in the first 6 months of the recovery, you're going to see digital win. Now then, I do believe that you will continue to see a shift towards the OTAs away from direct in this period, because I think there'll be, for one thing, I think an awful lot of the direct was driven by big chains spending advertising budgets, and the big chains are not going to be spending those advertising budgets. A lot of that advertising was brand led. Brand budgets will take a long time to come back. The stuff that's more about performance marketing, which is where the OTAs have been better, bidding on keywords, that will come back because that's an auction, and those prices are very responsive to demand. So I think that piece is going to come back first. So I do expect to see a little bit of a shift towards OTAs and away, or OTAs and meta search, and away from direct websites of the big chains over this piece. So I do think the OTAs are going to come out of this. Now, will it be exactly the same mix of OTAs that we've been used to over the last few years? I don't know. I mean, some of those OTAs are very profitable with great cash flow. Some of those OTAs have been more reliant on VC funds. We know that VC market's going to get a lot more rational over the next couple of years. So maybe you'll see a little bit of a different dynamic about who's driving your volumes. I would expect Booking.com to come out stronger from this. I would expect some of the other OTAs to be relatively weaker, but who knows exactly what that's going to look like.
Are there any OTAs you worry about surviving through this crisis? Not that I'm going to put you on the spot, but
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what each of the OTAs' balance sheets look like. So I wouldn't like to speculate on that. I think.
A couple of the questions, just one word answer. Somebody asked, "Who do you recommend as channel manager?"
Well, look, I've got to say, look, we can help you with that. So, as part of what we do, we would deliver that piece for you in addition to the revenue management.
Okay, that was Zuzu. The answer was Zuzu. That's who he recommends as your channel manager. Do you think there's a big gap between OTA and direct bookings during the recovery? So will the mix still be 80-20 during recovery, or will it be different?
I do think it's going to shift a little bit more to OTAs, and I think the reason for that is that the brand marketing budgets won't be there, and that drives a lot of the direct traffic. The other thing I think is, I think there's going to be people are going to want to see cleanliness certifications. Like the tourism authority in Thailand has already come out and said it's going to have this new cleanliness certification. That's the sort of thing you can imagine an OTA building a filter for pretty damn quickly. You can imagine that being a filter option on Booking.com or on Expedia. So I want to see who's been certified as having these deep cleanses every X days. And each country is going to come up with different things. And I could just imagine the OTAs being able to tap into surfacing that information much more quickly than any direct brand website can do that piece. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a shift. Look, I'm not one of these people who believes that the world's going to be dramatically different in 3 years than it is to pre this. I think if anything, an awful lot of people are going to want to get back to their previous lives because they'll be like, whoa, this wasn't so good. But there'll be some changes, and I think looking for stuff like cleanliness and that sort of thing will be more important. And I think the OTAs will be able to sort of surface that data in a systematic way, which will give them a little bit of an advantage.
All right, Dan, last question to close us out. They had a question about Zuzu's plans for the future. Specifically, they were wondering about regional expansion in new markets. They mentioned Vietnam. Tell us about what's ahead for Zuzu in the recovery phase from a growth and new markets perspective.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think our first priority right now is that we've got 2,200 hotels across Southeast Asia. And our first priority right now is working with them. So we're just doing an awful lot of internal stuff about, okay, how do we get ready for recovery? How do we do this massive spring clean project about really getting everything, every T crossed, every I dotted to really help those hotels. Really building out in addition to all the work we've done on the OTAs for them historically, really building out their direct channel strategy, really building out their meta search strategy as well. So we're actually quite focused on our existing set of hotels. Now, we're already operating in most of the Southeast Asian markets. We moved into Vietnam and Philippines as our last two Southeast Asian markets just at the end of last year, beginning of this year. So obviously, as we come out of the recovery, coming to that recovery stage, we do really want to ramp up there. In addition to, we've got very large teams already in Indonesia, in Thailand, and in Malaysia. We do serve hotels in Singapore, Laos, Myanmar, out of those markets as well. So really, it's just about us sort of doubling down on delivering for our existing hotels and then continuing to build out our network across Southeast Asia.
All right. Dan, thanks so much for joining the MG Leadership Series. Really appreciate your insights.
Okay, great. Good luck, everybody. Stay strong. And I think the best thing about this industry is that it's such a great bunch of people, and we're all in this together. And the reality is that one person's success doesn't preclude us all from succeeding in this industry because it's such a fragmented industry. So I think the thing I love most about what's happening right now is that the entire industry is coming together and sharing these ideas. Because frankly, I'd love you to come and work with us, and we can definitely help you. But a lot of this stuff you could also do yourself. And so I think the great thing is your success doesn't hinder our success, and each of your success doesn't hinder each other's success. There's a big industry out there. So let's all just help each other out and get through this and save as many jobs, save as many businesses, save as many careers as we can. And we'll have a great travel industry at the other side of this.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Suzu. Take care.
Bye-bye.